there. So this month we're talking about a healthy family. And we're definitely, you're hearing from some people that focus on really supporting families. And today's guest is someone who can, I think, add a lot of insight into what is available and what's going on in the family court system. So that's obviously when there's been some sort of divisiveness or something where it's necessary, and those cases happen, for the welfare of children, the welfare of a family. And Deborah is someone that has just really impressed me and how passionate she is. So this is introducing Debra Pittman. She's a partner in the firm that's Miles Hansford Tallant, and they're a family law practice, and that's her focus. She's a civil and family law mediator as well. So I thank you for joining us and adding some wisdom and insight. So the first thing that I want to talk about, and I think this is kind of obvious, at least it is to anybody that's in this topic of like the stress that COVID has placed on families is monumental. I talk to people that are raising kids right now. My kids are grown and out of the house, so I think there's so much stress when you have a family that is like hunkered down together and maybe having to be teacher and parent and all of those things. What have you seen from your perspective of what is, what have those effects been before COVID and then currently?
Sure, absolutely. So, as you've kind of acknowledged, family members are having to change up their routine or spend more time together under the same roof or in the same rooms together through this process. And we're definitely seeing that maybe some of the disagreements in how the day-to-day tasks are managed or how the house is managed, those are things that you didn't always see. I've got one case going on right now, for example, where, the primary sort of breadwinner was out of the house pretty much all day, and not sort of focused on kids' lunch times and sitting at the table and whether their shoes were put up right away when they were kicked off and things like that. And, when that person was at home all day working and there with the kids and spouse and working through some of that, his preference was different than kind of how things were managed day to day. And those sort of started little tiffs that, if not sort of handled appropriately or communication and boundaries aren't sort of dealt with in that family unit, they can snowball, unfortunately. And several professionals that I'm working with in my cases, counselors, psychiatrists, evaluators, they're really talking about this bubbling over of some mental health and or substance abuse that, while we've all known and acknowledged is there, the added stress of this pandemic and kind of not knowing what's next or a change in routine or loss of jobs, we're really starting to see some of that bubble over, and the first place that's going to impact is family life.
Sure. Yeah, I mean it's a pressure cooker for everybody. So
Absolutely.
so how do you get involved? Tell us a little bit about, what is your role as a family attorney?
Sure. So my practice, for me, primarily is going to be around sort of the divorces, child custody cases, things like that. We do a little bit in juvenile court, which is kind of the welfare of children, a dependency type matter. But really, the majority of my practice is in those divorce and sort of custody or support modification settings. And so with that, I always encourage people to be proactive if they have questions about what their family relationship means from a legal perspective, to sort of seek out that information from an attorney who knows the laws of the state of Georgia. For example, and this isn't really matter to the dynamics of family, but one thing people don't understand that's a pretty simple concept under the law is that from the day you're married until the day there's actually a divorce, any money coming in or going out of the house is kind of part of that marital pot. And people don't understand simple concepts like that. And so, what I say to people is, even if you're not wanting to get a divorce or separate, or if you're not wanting to really take action, but you're needing to understand what, if any, action could be taken along, the family lines at some point, is to reach out to that attorney. Now, the caveat to that is, you're going to want to find an attorney who's sort of not going to encourage unnecessary or premature litigation, because what we do is represent you through the legal processes, and we do try to talk about some practical and human solutions through that process, but we're not here to assist as counselors, and things like that. And so we're going to talk to you about how those relationships matter under the law. But my practice is to try to attempt, sort of amicable resolution at any cost. And then if you come to me and you say, I don't want a divorce, what have you seen work? What are things that I can do to avoid the split in this family? And I'm gonna help talk you through sort of some of those options as well, and get you connected to other professionals who are better suited to help on that front end. But then I'm also going to give you the understanding of steps you can take to protect yourself if unfortunately the inevitable separation or need to pursue litigation occurs.
Yeah, that's good, because I mean, obviously, at the end of the day, you want people to be able to. I particularly want to protect the children. I mean, I think
Absolutely.
probably the children tend to be the real victims here in the cases that you see. So, have you seen some? Have there been like happy resolutions? I mean, have you seen some like good stories of where the courts have been able to really support families?
Oh, absolutely. I think that the system is trying its best to provide sort of outcomes consistent with, what a child needs, what a family needs. I think what is very important and positive, especially with some of the professionals I work with, is when you get sort of two or three attorneys involved in a matter that are all working together for a long-term big picture solution, rather than let's just hurry to court and have a judge decide. Because what you've got to understand is, if you're going to take a divorce to trial, say, and the biggest issue there is custody, you're going to try to pack potentially 10, 15, 20 years of life events into a day to a week trial in front of one person who also has life experience, who's going to do their very best to make the right judgment call, but they're going to have a snapshot of your life, your marriage, and your family that's this compared to everything that's out there. So that's really the challenge. You want to be engaged with professionals around sort of family law, or counselors, or co-parent coordinators. These are sort of buzzwords and professional terms that we use through the process, that are going to help you and your spouse work together. I mean, my goal is, right now I've got several where luckily the attorney I'm working with on the other side, we say, look, priority number one is to get these parties communicating. And to get these parties communicating effectively, they're mourning the loss of this relationship, but that's between them. So now we've got to get them over that hurdle so that they're able to focus their energy on the kids. And for the most part, people are just human and are doing the best they can, sort of going through a really tough process.
Yeah.
And you've got to help them kind of recenter on what's next, because if this separation or divorce is happening, you can't control, that it's happening. So how do we give them the tools to be successful moving forward through that process?
Yeah. So I'm sure you've seen plenty of things that the courts, they fall short, because I mean, it's a court system and there's gazillions of cases, and like you said, there's one person that's in charge of deciding something that's such a big decision. I was thinking as you were talking, I was thinking of the show. Did you ever watch the show Judging Amy?
I've heard of it, but I have not watched it.
Well, I have the whole box set. My children gifted it to me if you ever want to sit down and like binge watch. And, I'm sure it's idealistic, and I hope some of it's real. It's, the Amy, I think her name is Brenneman, maybe. So she becomes a family law judge.
Okay.
And her mother, who was Cagney and Lacey, I can't think of her actual name, but she was in the show Cagney and Lacey. I'm showing my age. but so she's a social worker. And so you see so many of the cases that are the mother and daughter kind of working together, sometimes against each other. But so you don't know that show to kind of laugh with me about it, but it was a great show. I mean, it really did champion the court system and champion, not gloss over what's going on with like social work, social workers and all of that. Do you work much with like the social workers and getting involved in that whole welfare of the kids aspect?
So there are pilot programs, for example, in Fulton County, where sometimes you can have a social worker rather than what's called a guardian ad litem assist you through your case. And that's in cases where financials are a big consideration, because what a guardian ad litem, typically, if a guardian ad litem is appointed during a court case, that's going to be another attorney who's stepping in to represent the children. And that's generally an attorney who's going to charge an hourly rate. And then the parents are going to have to, pay that hourly rate, in some percentage, on each side,
Right.
generally speaking. And so now you need this person, right, to investigate on behalf of the court and sort of figure out, what the truth is, right? Because you've got one parent's attorney telling and advocating for their client, another parent's attorney telling and advocating for their client. And the truth is generally somewhere in the middle, because we're battling perceptions. And so if we don't have options available like social workers, sometimes that's just cost prohibitive. And so that's why we try to engage counselors and things like that when we can, because that's more cost effective for parties to begin finding those solutions. But unfortunately, the custody arguments, the custody battles, so to speak, are the most emotionally charged. And they can get to a place where you really have no choice but to have someone really digging through the muck, so to speak. There's enough out there in any relationship, as we all know, that you could make, your partner stink for a minute.
No, I don't want anybody scrutinizing the things I've said.
No.
As a mother, as a spouse, as a wife. I mean, we're human. We say things,
Absolutely.
We do things that we wish we could take back. So yeah.
I would say my goal is always de-escalation, so that we can get there and remember that humanity and remember that we've all made mistakes and sort of try to, but it's the hardest thing in the world to think as a parent that you're losing time with your child when you don't want to, so we get it. A little bit more of the dependency. So like sometimes that's in juvenile court, and you'll have some case where the Department of Family and Child Services, people call it DFACS, will get involved. And so there's caseworkers in that process that are working with families to try and develop what are called safety plans. So if there's an immediate concern, they'll sit down with the family unit and try to say, okay, here are the things we need to address. Here's the counseling that we're encouraging. And these are all services that the department can assist you with. And so that is sort of prior to court intervention. The only time there's going to be court intervention is if the department believes that there is a child who is actually dependent and in need of a judge and judicial oversight to make some decisions. And so really the goal of DFACS there is to kind of provide those services before it reaches the level of dependency. But the caseworkers are overwhelmed as well. And then I certainly never blame a client for coming the second they hear about the department getting involved, coming to ask for an attorney and guidance, because the last thing you want is to not understand what the implications of sitting down and speaking to someone could be. So this idea, it's imperfect, but people are trying, the best they can. And sometimes things go off the rails and we've got to do what we can to bring them back on. But other times there's really some great services that are provided so the family can thrive moving forward.
Well, I think the summary here is, do everything you can before you would ever need an attorney. If you can, use the resources of whatever type of therapy that is out there for the couple, for the whole family. But it is good to know that there's people like you that are caring, that aren't just pushing people through the system, but that you really do take an interest in what is the, best for the family without trying to just create more billable hours, which I think we see, lawyers have a bad name for that, but not all lawyers, just like not all anything is good or bad. So I really appreciate how much you have dedicated to, really looking out for all the families. Do you ever get to do like the fun things like with adoptions?
Oh,
And
yeah.
I mean, that's got to be like the best day when you're in court for that. Everybody's so happy.
Yes. So earlier this year, before everything was kind of shut down, I was able to finalize a step parent adoption that I'd been working on for a while. And it was just the happiest little family. And we were in Cherokee County. The judge was great, got down there. I mean, they had their whole family there. There were pictures with everybody. I got to be in the pictures. So we definitely do that. And I'm always excited to help with that. Now, I will say, as far as, department, agency adoptions and things like that, I don't really get into that. There are some attorneys in the state that really specialize, because adoptions are very ticky tacky and you've got to follow those sort of to the letter. But as far as, families that are having adoptions within those families, step parent adoptions, grandparents, aunts, uncles, even third parties, as long as everybody's kind of in Georgia and rocking and rolling along and agreeing together. Those are just always so great. And an exciting part. And I mean, sometimes, one thing we do even with the divorce is a lot of times it'll be uncontested. People will come and they'll kind of say, look, this isn't working anymore. Here's the work we've already done up to this point, and here's what we're thinking we're going to do. And
Yeah.
I'm in the room and they're both there. I can only represent one of them, but they trust each other and they're already communicating and co-parenting, and they figured that out. And so those are always good days.
I love that. Yeah, I love hearing stories where they split up, the couple splits up, and they're still friends. They still, even celebrate birthdays or holidays together because they're still a family. I mean, you're never gonna separate that. So I like hearing that's a good thing if when
Sure.
it doesn't work. So
But at the same time, I will say there are those cases where I say, you know what? Let's figure out a solution where y'all can have sort of minimal face-to-face time. And as
yeah,
long as y'all are communicating effectively in text or emails, or, and y'all just don't need to be around each other, that's kind of okay
that's
too.
awesome too.
Obviously we want the kids to be able to enjoy those sort of moments in life where both parents can be present and engaged in enjoying it. That's not always an option. And so we try to come up with solutions that are going to help sort of, at least in the beginning, get parents over
Yeah.
the part where it's strained.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, thank you so much. This has been a really, really great information. I'm going to post information about if someone knows someone that is maybe in need of your services, that, they can file this information away, but we'll post your phone number, your office phone number, and your email address. Anything that, any last, parting information of how when they should get in touch with you or
Sure,
just reach out to
absolutely.
you?
And, just thank you again for having me. I love the opportunity to kind of chat with people, and it's really choosing your lawyer when you're going through something as difficult as, child custody cases, or a divorce, a separation. That is probably the single most important decision you're going to make in that process, because the attorneys can really help or they can hurt. Whether it's financially, whether it's bad advice, whether they're plugged in. So I just say, if you're considering that, consider meeting with a few people and then decide based on who you've met with and who you kind of jived with, because not every attorney is for every client, not every client is for every attorney. So
Right.
I would just say that. And then I always encourage people, even if you don't want a divorce, even if that's not the route you want to go, or you don't want to engage in sort of some litigation, we are here to sort of be a sounding board for you and consult with you without any without you having to then retain us and go sort of the next step. Just come and sit down and talk to us about what we're seeing working, or just best practices, down the road should something occur. Or, maybe you're realizing that you're starting a new relationship and you've been divorced and you've got custody considerations and you want to understand what the implications of that could be moving forward. We're not just here when everything goes sideways. We're here to sort of help you develop a game plan to avoid sort of costly, protracted litigation. And by costly, I mean financial, but also emotional. So,
Yeah, I hear you. Wonderful. Well, that's great information, appreciated information. So it's all about, however we can get there to have a healthy family. Is a healthy family is a healthy everybody, right?
absolutely.
So
Absolutely.